The September morning sun cast long shadows across the streets of Southport as two cars carrying the Prince and Princess of Wales made their way toward Farnborough Road Infant and Junior School. For the residents of this quiet coastal town, the sight of a royal visit would normally bring excitement, perhaps even celebration. But on this particular Tuesday, the atmosphere felt different. The crowds that lined the streets held no banners, no flags. Instead, they stood in solemn silence, many with tears already streaming down their faces, clutching photographs of three young girls who should still have been alive. Inside the first vehicle, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stared out the window at the gathering crowd. Her heart pounded against her chest in a way that had nothing to do with the cameras or the public scrutiny she had long grown accustomed to. This was different. This was the kind of visit that no amount of royal training could prepare a person for. Beside her, that Prince William sat in quiet contemplation, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the school building coming into view. Neither of them spoke much during the final approach. There were no words adequate for what they were about to do. The date was September 23rd, 2025, and the Prince and Princess of Wales had returned to Southport for the first time since the darkest day this community had ever known. And more than a year had passed since Axel Rudakubana walked into a Taylor Swift-themed dance class and transformed a summer afternoon into an unspeakable nightmare. When the attack ended, three little girls, Alice da Silva Aguiar, just 9 years old, Bebe King, only 6, and Elsie Dot Stancombe, 7, had been murdered. 8 other children lay wounded, their innocent afternoons of dancing and laughter forever stained by violence. As the royal vehicles came to a stop outside Farnborough Road School, the school where little Elsie Dot Stancombe had been a pupil, William turned to his wife. Their eyes met, and in that brief exchange, there passed between them an entire conversation. They had both faced grief before. William knew the particular agony of losing someone too young, too suddenly. Catherine had spent the previous year fighting her own battle against cancer, they facing her own mortality while trying to protect her 3 children from the weight of what their family was enduring. But this was different. This was the grief of parents who had sent their children to a dance class and never brought them home. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the engine. William reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "None of us are ready for this. We just have to be here." "That's all we can do." The car door opened, and the princess stepped out into the September air. She had chosen her outfit carefully that morning, a soft pink Burberry blouse with a delicate tie neck paired with a gray jigsaw coat dress. It was understated, respectful, nothing that would draw attention away from the purpose of this visit. But it was the accessory on her wrist that caught the attention of those who looked closely. A simple friendship bracelet, for the kind children trade and treasure, spelling out a name, Bebe. Beside her, William wore a matching bracelet. They had been gifts from Lauren King, Bebe's mother, during a private meeting earlier that day. When Lauren had placed the bracelets in their hands, she had explained through tears that Baby loved making friendship bracelets, just like the ones Taylor Swift fans traded at concerts. It was a small connection, a fragile thread linking the Princess of Wales to a little girl she would never meet. Catherine had put the bracelet on immediately and had not taken it off since. Inside the school, the atmosphere was heavy with memory. The hallways that should have echoed with children's laughter felt muted, as if the building itself was still in mourning. William and Catherine were led to a small room where Elsie's parents, Jenny and David, waited to meet them. Also present were Alex and Sergio, the Alice's parents, and Lauren and Ben, Bebe's mother and father. These were the parents united by the worst possible bond, brought together by violence and loss, forever connected to 3 little girls who would never grow up. The meeting lasted nearly 20 minutes, though it felt both impossibly long and far too short. There were no prepared speeches, no formal protocols. Just people sitting together in a small room, trying to find words for the unspeakable. Lauren King showed Catherine more of the friendship bracelets Bebe had made, explaining how her daughter had loved colors and patterns, and the simple joy of creating something to give to others. Catherine listened intently, asking gentle questions, letting Lauren talk about her daughter the way grieving parents need to talk, not about how she died, but about how she lived. When the meeting ended, William stood and addressed the parents directly. His voice was thick with emotion, but he forced himself to speak clearly, to let them hear every word. "We will always be here to support you," he told them. Always. It was not a royal platitude. It came from somewhere deeper, from the part of him that still carried the weight of his own mother's death, that understood how grief could reshape a life. From Farnborough Road, the royal couple traveled to Churchtown Primary School, where Alice and Bebe had been pupils. Here, something remarkable had happened in the months since the tragedy. The school community, determined to create something positive from their grief, had launched a fundraising appeal to build a memorial playground. Alice and Elsie's fathers had run the London Marathon to raise money. The community had poured donations into the project, transforming their collective sorrow into a place where children could play and laugh and simply be children. William and Catherine had privately donated to the appeal, though they had insisted the donation remain anonymous. But as they walked through the new playground, watching children climb and swing and slide, the weight of what this place represented settled over them. This was not just a playground. It was a declaration that love would have the final word, that 3 little girls would be remembered not for how they died, but for the joy they had brought to the world. And the moment came for William to speak. He stepped forward to face the assembled children, teachers, and parents, his notes clutched in hands that trembled slightly. Behind him, Catherine stood with the other parents, her presence a quiet source of strength. William cleared his throat and began to speak, his words carrying across the playground where Bebe and Alice had once played. The tragic events that unfolded in this town last year still remain difficult to comprehend, he said, on his voice rough with emotion. But last year, Sergio and Alex, you told us you wanted to create a special playground in memory of the girls, and here we are. Your vision and your determination, supported by Ginny, the trust and people's generosity, has made this hope a reality. As he continued, William addressed the parents directly, naming each of them, acknowledging their individual grief while honoring their collective strength. To Alex and Sergio, Lauren and Ben, and Jenny and David, you are parents united in grief. You have faced such horror, but from that you move forward with grace and fortitude, creating the most remarkable legacies for your girls. It was when he spoke to the children that his voice nearly broke. To the teaching community here at Churchtown Primary and Farnborough Road, where we visited this morning, each and every one of you has gone above and beyond to help heal this incredible group of young people. Thank you. Behind him, Catherine watched her husband with an expression that cameras would later capture and the nation would come to treasure. There was pride there, certainly, but also something deeper, a recognition of the man he had become, the weight he carried, the compassion he brought to a role that could so easily have hardened him. As William finished speaking and the applause began, Catherine leaned toward him. A soft smile played at the corners of her mouth, and she spoke quietly, words meant only for him. William turned, caught her gaze, and responded with a look that spoke of 20 years together, of 3 children and countless challenges, of a partnership that had weathered storms that would have broken others. Royal fans watching the footage later would call them soulmates. They would comment on the way they looked at each other, the ease between them, the obvious love that still animated their marriage after all these years. But in that moment it was simpler than that. It was just a husband and wife, holding each other up in the face of overwhelming sorrow, finding strength in each other so they could offer it to others. The visit continued with a tour of the playground, where William and Catherine met with children who had been classmates of the three girls. They knelt down to speak at the children's level, a gesture that echoed what Diana had done years before. So a royal tradition of meeting people where they are rather than expecting them to rise to meet royalty. Catherine asked children about their favorite parts of the playground, listened to their stories, let them guide her through the spaces that had been built in memory of their friends. At one point, a young girl approached Catherine shyly, holding a small drawing she had made. It showed 3 figures with crowns, labeled simply Alice, Bebe, Elsie. Catherine knelt down immediately, and her eyes filling with tears as she examined the drawing. "This is beautiful," she told the girl. "They would have loved this so much." The girl beamed, and for just a moment, the playground was filled with something that felt almost like joy. As the afternoon wore on, William and Catherine prepared to depart. But before they left, they asked to spend a few more moments with the parents. In a quiet corner of the school, away from cameras and officials, they sat together one last time. But Lauren King had brought more friendship bracelets, offering them to the royal couple as keepsakes. William accepted his gravely, turning it over in his hands, reading the name Bebe spelled out in colorful beads. "I'll wear this always," he promised, and he meant it. Catherine removed her bracelet briefly to examine it more closely, then carefully put it back on. "Thank you for sharing Bebe with us," she said to Lauren, "for letting us know her through you. That's a gift we'll never forget." The drive back from Southport was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the journey there. The weight remained. It would never fully lift. But there was something else now, too. A sense of having done something that mattered, of having shown up in a way that might mean something to these families in the long years ahead. That evening, at Kensington Palace, William and Catherine sat together in their private quarters, the day's events settling over them like dust. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had been told about the visit, had asked questions about the playground and the little girls. Catherine had shown them the friendship bracelets, had explained how Bebe had loved making them, how children everywhere were remembering her through these small, colorful tokens. Later, when the children were in bed, William sat alone in his study, the bracelet still on his wrist. He thought about his mother, about the way she had connected with people, about the lessons she had taught him without meaning to. He thought about the parents in Southport, about the long road ahead of them, about how grief changes, but never truly ends. And he thought about his wife, about the way she had moved through that day with such grace, such genuine warmth, such strength. The nation would see footage of that day and weep. They would watch William's speech and Catherine's quiet support and feel, perhaps, that their royal family understood something about their lives, about their grief, about what it meant to be human in a world that could be so cruel. But for William and Catherine, it was simpler than that. It was about 3 little girls who loved to dance. It was about parents whose lives had been shattered. It was about a community that refused to let darkness have the final word. And it was about showing up, even when showing up was the hardest thing in the world. And the friendship bracelets stayed on their wrists for days afterward. Eventually, they would be carefully preserved, placed somewhere safe, reminders of a day that changed them both. But the memory of Southport, of those parents, of those children, would remain forever, woven into the fabric of who they were and who they would become. In the months that followed, William would speak publicly about that day, about what it had taught him. The people of Southport showed us what resilience really looks like, he would say. They showed us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. And Catherine, in her own quiet way, would carry the lesson forward. At her. Together at Christmas concert that December, she would speak of love and hope and the importance of community. The service at Westminster Abbey would be beautiful, filled with music and light, attended by celebrities and dignitaries. But in her heart, she would carry the image of a playground in Southport, of children laughing in a place built to remember their friends, of parents who had chosen grace over bitterness, love over hate. That was the true legacy of that September day, not the headlines or the photographs or the commentary about soulmates, but the quiet understanding that even a prince and princess are not immune to grief, that royalty and ordinary citizens alike must find their way through darkness, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up and stay present. The nation had wept at William and Catherine's words, at the raw emotion in William's voice and the tender support in Catherine's eyes. But what they were really weeping for was themselves, for their own grief, for the 3 little girls who had become symbols of innocence, lost. William and Catherine had simply given them permission to feel it, to acknowledge it, to begin the long, slow process of healing. And in a playground in Southport, 3 little girls would be remembered forever, not for how they died, but for the love they inspired, the community they built, and the hope that rose from their ashes. That was the real story. That was the truth behind the tears.